Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. I'm Jason Rosenbaum. If you're immersed in the world of politics, it may seem strange to encounter people who are decidedly apathetic about government, elections, or the political process. But in many respects, political obsessives like me are deviating from the norm, as lots of people in Missouri and around the country are expressing discontent and apathy as the 2024 election cycle churns on. So how deep is voter apathy in 2024? Joining us now is St. Louis University's Ken Warren, a political science professor and an expert in public polling. Warren has been involved in the SLU YouGov poll, which we talked about on a recent episode of the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air. Professor Warren, welcome to the show.
My pleasure.
There are ideas as to why voters become apathetic, but what has surveying and research found as to the reason folks tune out of politics?
There are numerous reasons for it. Of course, one is issue salience, that people just aren't interested in the issue. So they, you see very low turnout, for instance, in municipal elections and special elections, because there are issues that people just aren't interested in. A lot of people actually do not follow local government very much, so municipal elections frequently are down below 20%. In special elections, they've been known to drop below 10%. The polls have been conducted on why people don't vote, which of course reflects voter apathy. And the main reason people giving for not voting is disinterest. They're not motivated to vote. And they give a lot of excuses for not voting. I'm busy, I had a conflict, but, pollsters interpret that, and electoral behavior scholars interpret that as just making excuses, that they're really disinterested in and therefore not motivated to turn out and vote.
Okay, so I cannot peer into the minds of millennial and Generation Z voters who may feel the need to tune out to politics, but I do have a theory. In my 39 years on this earth, I've absorbed the following current events: the Columbine high school shootings, the 9/11 terrorist attacks, wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Ukraine, a seemingly never-ending conflict between Israel and the Palestinians, economic calamities in 2008 and 2020, nationwide and local protests over police shooting and killing Black people, and the COVID-19 pandemic. So do you think the act of tuning out of politics may be less about not caring and more about looking away from waves of trauma that just seemed endless?
Well, that's one theory for sure. I mean, the opposite of that is that these conflicts have caused people to get angry and actually turn out and vote. I mean, right now you see the protest against Wesley Bell because of his position pretty much supporting Israel, despite the fact that the Israeli-Hamas conflict has attracted attention against Israel and Netanyahu for his, let's say, overreaction. So, during the Vietnam War, students got more interested, and it did not mean that they actually voted, but they got more interested in politics and demonstrated and so forth. So, that's a tough one, Jason, to reach a conclusion as to whether or not events, crises, wars going bad, and so forth actually cause voter apathy. They might cause more interest, actually, in the election, because they want to vote for candidates who support their side or vote against candidates who do not.
One of our listeners gave a good example of how the state of politics makes them want to tune out. Morgan Bradley shared on Instagram that staying engaged with politics is, quote, draining because what she sees is, quote, too much debating back and forth. It's a circus. I need an Excel spreadsheet with facts and falsehoods. And you kind of mentioned this. It's a chicken and egg situation where, like, nasty debating about the blurry lines between fact and fiction could lead to discontent and apathy. But without engaged voters, there could be more misconceptions and more misinformation and more lies that rise to the surface. Is there a solution, both of these issues being connected, or are they two problems that need to be addressed separately?
Well, I stand in front of students all the time. Of course, these students are mostly engaged because I'm a political scientist teaching mostly political science students, and so they are more engaged. However, they are turned off by the politics of the day, the bitter polarization that really is something that you might say, oh, well, we've always had it. No, that's not true. Studies have shown that polarization has increased like crazy since the 1990s when essentially Newt Gingrich, started, known as the bomb thrower in the early 1990s, started attacking Democrats with a lot of bitterness. Even the Bush administration at the time did not like that. They were not. George H. Walker Bush was not any friend of Newt Gingrich, and they had infamous arguments over Newt Gingrich's action. Well, since that time, the Democrats, of course, reacted, and that has gone back and forth to widen polarization, and that has caused a lot of people to withdraw from politics. That's true. Now turnout has been record-breaking, by the way, and like in the last few elections. But why has that been record-breaking? It's not that they like the candidates. In fact, Nate Silver points out in the last two elections, the candidates have not been liked at all. So in this race coming up, the voters are looking at these two candidates, and as you know, they don't like them. And it's the second worst, perception of negative attitudes toward the presidential candidates ever. And the only other one that was just before in 2016, when voters did not like Clinton or Trump. So, this is not going to be a big turnout to turn out and vote if you don't like the candidates, you might say. But on the other hand, look at the fact that you had record-breaking turnouts in the last few elections.
In 2020 and 2022, that's what you mean?
No, 2016 and 2020,
okay.
The presidential elections. And 2018 was a great turnout for Democrats. So, so youth have been voting more than they have in the past. And so, youth normally vote, I'm talking about the under 30 votes. They usually vote half as much as the oldest age group, 65 and over. And not, they don't vote very well compared to the second to age group, either the 45 to 65-year-old age group.
I'd like to invite our listeners into this conversation. If you have a question or comment about this topic, give us a call at 314-382-8255. That's 382-TALK, or you can send us a tweet at STL On Air, or email us at talk@stlpr.org. We've heard a lot of stories, primarily nationally, about voter discontent leading up to the 2024 election cycle, and that's true with our listeners. Matt from St. Louis shared this voice memo about why he's struggling to care about this year's elections.
If the choices in the presidential election are a sitting president enabling an ongoing genocide and a former president who is a crook and a con artist, I'm just choosing not to vote. It makes it hard to care about the rest of the ballot when those are our options for the head of the country.
That is Matt from St. Louis leaving a voicemail for this conversation. Is it, Professor Warren, is it easier for people like who live in Missouri to take that stance when the presidential election is likely predetermined, like a Republican is likely going to win our electoral votes, than somebody who's getting bombarded with going to the polls in a place like Arizona or Michigan, Wisconsin, et cetera?
Absolutely. In fact, studies show that what are called spectator states, Missouri would be a spectator state. That means states that are not battleground states. In battleground states, studies have shown that in almost all of them, the vote turnout is much higher than it is in spectator states. I mean, I come originally from Massachusetts. You might say, well, what's the point of showing up to vote in Massachusetts? At least for the presidential election, there are other reasons to go out and vote because you've got gubernatorial campaigns and senatorial campaigns and so forth. So that would be reason enough to go out and vote. But it is true that nonetheless, studies have shown that in spectator states, the turnout is much lower. They were, in this one graph I saw, they were rating the turnout in all the states, and virtually every one of them but two of the spectator states were ranked way down there in terms of turnout versus the battleground states where the turnout was much higher. Because obviously it makes a difference. It doesn't make much difference in states like by the way, about 40 states are spectator states. Mm-hmm. Very few of them are battleground states.
Let's go to the phones. Jerry from O'Fallon, Missouri. Welcome to the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air.
I think part of the problem with burnout is the fact that in most other countries, in some countries it's mandatory to vote, or it's much more highly encouraged than it is here. And also campaigning is limited to like 6 or 8 weeks. There are no such thing as commercial or paid commercials. The access is balanced because it's funded. It's essentially given away time, which of course we won't see here because television, the media makes a large amount of money during campaign season. And every day it's about the horse race. It seems that the presidential campaign begins 6 months after a president is inaugurated, and we're bombarded daily with who's up, who's down, just to keep eyeballs on the page or the screen. And unless we fix that and get the sheer fact of, money is free speech, that's another detriment. This is just what we're going to see until we decide we need to change it.
Thank you, Jerry. Professor Warren, what did you think of Jerry's comments?
I think Jerry is a very informed person because all of what he said is true. In other countries of the world, in many of the developed countries of the world, they require you to vote. Some countries actually stamp a card so that you get benefits, so that you really need to turn out and vote to get those benefits. In the United States, of course, we do not require voting. And, of course, our registration process may be somewhat, but it might be somewhat difficult for people. You can be purged, after so many years from the voting rolls if you do not vote. And so we have sometimes in some states inconvenient registration and voting sites. That causes a problem as well. We also have frequent elections. We have elections all the time in the United States, and that's a big turnoff to voters too. Most countries do not have that many elections. We have elections for practically everything, and they just keep coming and coming and coming. Right after the presidential election, the next thing you know, they're talking about municipal elections, and then not too long after that, you're talking about congressional election, and congressional election years. You're talking about special elections, school bond issues that are put on the ballot. So voters are bombarded with elections, and that causes them to get rather tired and apathetic because it takes a lot to be interested and keep up on with all the candidates and the issues that are on ballots. And by the way, we also have long ballots, ridiculously long ballots with everything on the ballot you can imagine, including all these judges you vote for.
Oh yeah, in St. Louis County, if you live in St. Louis County, sometimes there's literally 20 judges to choose. from.
Yeah, and even the most informed people like us, let's say, Jason. I mean, we don't know all those judges. I mean, so it's not a very informed vote either. It's sort of a silly thing to put judges on the ballot like that, but it's part of the Missouri plan, and that's what we do.
We're talking with Ken Warren, a professor of political science at St. Louis University. So we've also had listeners like Cindy email us, choosing not to vote is never an option, and our democracy is currently in jeopardy. It is essential to vote, the best option we have to remain the great country we are currently. Could the fear of, for example, this is kind of where I'm reading between the lines of Cindy's comments, the fear of Trump coming back, could that be a motivating factor to shake people who may be upset with Biden kind of out of their apathetic funk?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, in 2020, it was pretty much the main reason why people got out and vote in extra numbers and record-breaking numbers, because they turned out to vote against Trump and what he stood for. And I think a lot of people will. I agree with Cindy, who said that voting really shouldn't be an option. You should get out and vote. And particularly in this election, I know people always say that, but we have a very unusual candidate running, and actually he's ahead in the polls right now. And I can tell you, frankly, he poses a threat to democracy. There's no question about that. I mean, it's not an opinion that I should be criticized for. The guy, obviously, if anyone follows politics, knows that he has said certain things, done certain things that are insurrectionist, and so that he has no real respect for the rule of law, the Constitution. He's trashed the presidency, and as a result, political scientists like myself do not like him and feel that voters should get out and vote against him. But he has a cult following, Jason. He's very popular. If the election were being held today, he would win. He is ahead in virtually every battleground state, and even in some beyond the margin of error, states that he lost last time. And so, regardless of what he does, we political scientists look at the electorate, and we can't understand why the plurality of voters want to elect him again.
Let's go back to the phone lines. Pierre from St. Louis. Welcome to the Politically Speaking Hour on St. Louis on the Air.
Yeah, let me say hello to my former professor, Professor Warren.
Hi.
Hi. What I wanted to say was that I think democracy is on the ballot. I think that if we look at where we are right now, 2016 is the barometer from which we look at. If you choose to sit out on this election, Trump could win. And the problem with that now is that we don't have to speculate anymore about who he is, because he has shown who he is in his presidency before. So I think that we have to vote the lesser of the two evils if there are individuals who don't think that they can support President Biden. But at the same time, democracy is on the ballot. And if you think that we are having problems now, the day after the election in which you have a dictator who wants to run the United States is problematic.
Thank you, Pierre, for your call. Professor Warren, do you have anything to add to Pierre's comments?
Well, Pierre was one of my good students in the past. In fact, I went to his wedding. I'm glad he called. And I agree with what Pierre said. I think that he's learned a lot, knows a lot, and he realizes that democracy is on the ballot. I am not that outspoken about Republican and Democratic candidates usually. I mean, Republicans have had great presidents. Democrats have had great presidents and poor ones as well. And most times we have disagreed on issues that Republicans and Democrats, put up. But this is different. As Romney said when he, backed out of, supporting Trump, he said there were three reasons that I considered. One, his stance on foreign policy, and he said, "Well, I disagree with him on foreign policy because I'm mostly a globalist and believe in mutual defense pacts and trade agreements." On domestic policy, he said that he mostly agreed with Trump on most of his domestic legislation. But he said the third one was character, and he said that was a deal breaker. That Trump's character is in the dumpster, and it is, as Pierre just said, all you have to do is look at what he says, what he does. What he said today, a few days ago about illegal immigrants, that they're just animals and stuff, and how he referred to countries in the past very crudely. The president of the United States doing that, that's embarrassing for Americans to see their president saying those kind of things and acting the way he does, and lashing out at all people he doesn't like or aren't his supporters. That's ridiculous.
In the 1 minute we have left, you said that you expect the turnout to be lower than 2020. Is it possible that maybe a current event we haven't seen yet, or maybe an issue like abortion, could maybe cause turnout to jump over expectations?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, turnout would be expected to be lower only because it was so record-breaking in 2020. Are people worn out looking at these two candidates? Biden's age, frankly, and it's not his fault. There's nothing he can do about it. But his age is a big factor. I mean, polls show that, the overwhelming percentage of Democrats and Republicans think that he's too old to serve. I think that events coming up could change, how people feel about this election. And it's, we can only speculate what the turnout will be in November.
Ken Warren is a professor of political science at St. Louis University and is also a subject matter expert in polling and public opinion. Professor Warren, thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure, Jason.
This episode was produced by Maya Norfleet.
Our audio engineer is Aaron Dorr. This podcast was mixed and edited by Aaron.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
St. Louis on the Air proudly supports local artists by using music from Life Creative Group.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.